Hi, I'm Shane, and I'll be talking about policies and problems in the widespread use of AI writing assistants. So in class, we actually asked our students, we took a poll seeing what they thought the policy should be for using writing assistants like ChatGPT for class and for homework. And interestingly, but perhaps not unsurprisingly, they all thought that it should be allowed in and out of class, but some of them said that there should be some additional criteria related to how it was used. And usually the most popular amendment to its use was that there should be some sort of disclosure or disclaimer about when it's used and how it's used. And but a large portion of students also recommended other sort of amendments. And among those, here's some anonymous comments. Some students were really optimistic about using large language models for homework, being an exercise for learning how to use the tool, but we need to learn to acknowledge how it's used, when it's used. Some students also thought that using large language models for homeworks and projects in the class should not only be permitted, but strongly encouraged. But that they shouldn't just copy and paste the outputs, they should constantly refine the prompt and edit the output. And in general, people thought it was a strong teaching tool. It should even be allowed in some cases to guide them through their homework. And some students did think, though, that the LM should be properly cited and documented and shouldn't be used in the cases for personal opinion or evaluating a topic rather than a student. So what are regulators saying about AI-generated text? In the US, there's an AI Bill of Rights being proposed that says it calls for a notice and explanation when an automated system is being used. And in the EU, similarly, they're saying that if an AI system is used to generate or manipulate image, audio, or video content that appreciably resembles authentic content, there should be an obligation to disclose the content is generated through automated means. But it's not quite that simple, as pointed out by Jakesh et al. It hardly seems necessary to add notice to every message people write with AI-enabled autocorrection, smart replies, or translations, many of which are the same underlying technology as ChatGPT. What are other policies from other organizations about the use of writing assistants powered by large language models? So the education sector has been highly influenced by the drop of ChatGPT. I pulled some quotes from this Forbes article that shows schools in Seattle, LA, and New York have had to ban ChatGPT because it's had an effect on students cheating, and they believe that it stymies the ability for these students to build critical thinking and problem-solving skills. And the issue is that these teachers don't really have a way to enforce a prohibition on these for homeworks outside of the classroom or reasonably detect it when it is used in many cases. Similarly, in the science fiction world, there's a decades-old renowned science fiction and fantasy magazine that has always prohibited the use of AI tools for submissions to their journal. However, it's been a skyrocket of submissions that they're alleging mostly are AI generated right after the drop of ChatGPT, and they have not had the manual curation abilities to deal with this influx of content, which violates their policies. As a result, they've had to temporarily shut down the submission portal. And notably, they don't mention how they're able or whether they're accurately able to detect synthetically generated stories and submissions, but it's definitely challenged their business and the procedures they currently use. Now, what about the science journals? So the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences also asked that there be disclosure, a clear acknowledgement when things like ChatGPT are used. However, they've had an issue where many people have listed ChatGPT as an author, but they ban this because it does not meet the criteria for authorship, since it cannot share responsibility for the paper or be held accountable for the integrity of the data reported. Another prominent conference, this time in machine learning, ICML, where many of the authors are very familiar with the underlying technology of ChatGPT and may have contributed to some of its developments. they are banning the use of ChatGPT to produce text that is presented as part of the paper's experimental analysis. However, they are not prohibiting the tool from being used for editing or polishing author-written text. And the reason for this is because there's many non-English speaking authors that submit to these conferences that need and are helped benevolently by these tools to polish the draft and their writing while not changing the underlying meaning and responsibility they have towards the work. But ICML importantly does note that this policy is largely predicated on the principle of being conservative, and they do expect it may evolve in future conferences. And so they realize that it's not the final word. Another conference in natural language processing that's highly prominent is the Association for Computational Linguistics. And they've actually separated different ways in which these writing assistants can be used and suggestions for how that should be dealt with. And so they say for writing assistants that's purely with the language of the paper, like ICML, they allow that. They don't think that tools like Grammarly or spell checkers or translators necessarily need to be disclosed. But where a model is giving new ideas, contributing new ideas, they do suggest that there be acknowledgement of how the model is used. And also they tell people to look for underlying sources of those ideas and acknowledge them, because often ideas put forward by language models might have come uncited from other people's work which appeared in their training data. And in the case where a generated text is being put directly in the paper that also contributed new ideas, so it's new ideas and new text, they tend to discourage this. And the reason is that this generated text, there's a difficult credit assignment problem. So it's unclear who's responsible for it. Is it the developers, the model, the authors, the training data, or the user who prompted the model to generate it? And lastly, let's talk a little bit about large language model detectors and the enforcement when they're not disclosed. So increasingly, there's a wide proliferation of language model generated text on the internet. In fact, there already was from large amounts of text that were translated and synthetically generated, especially in the patent law space, which our models are already trained on. But increasingly, it's difficult to detect, because they're so human-like, whether text that appears on the internet is human or non-human. And so OpenAI, Stanford, and many organizations have developed tools to help classify whether text is human or AI generated. The issue is that they're not 100% accurate. In fact, they miss many pieces of content which are AI generated, not realizing that they are. But also they have false positives where they believe that content was AI generated or classified as such with high confidence, when in fact that content was human written. And in the case of the education system and trying to catch students that are cheating, this could have very negative consequences when people are wrongly accused. Lastly, there's one other detection mechanism that's being developed, which is a watermark for large language models. So watermarking images and videos has been fairly successful because the rich space of pixels leaves lots of room to discreetly embed a watermark or information that shows that an image or video has been generated or tampered with by an AI. However, in the language space, that tends to be quite even more difficult. And I'll let you take a look at this paper to understand why. But these models are in active development, these solutions rather. But nonetheless, they're still lagging behind the AI-generated text itself. So in summary, I'll finish off by listing out the key points that I think are relevant to deciding on policies. And that is that disclosure, regulators and organizations, and everyone seems to think that that is a key component of responsible use of AI. But it's not always clear whether every use of AI should be disclosed. There's also ambiguity in whether the AI contributed new or meaningful ideas or just changed the language. And It's not clear that AIs should ever be held as authors of works, given that they cannot take responsibility or accountability for their writing as a human author can. There's also a very difficult credit assignment problem that when models do generate text that seems to be new, we don't know whether that might have originated from some source in the training data, or the user who generated it, or the developers of the model, or something else. And lastly, the undisclosed use of large language models is on the rise, and it is causing problems in education, in journals, and potentially even in civil engagement in the future. Organizations, unfortunately, are unable to cope with the scale and attribution problem, and the detection tools they have at their disposal for enforcement are also lagging behind. Thank you.